Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show, where we get behind the innovation to talk about the stories that make innovation happen. All of those compelling tales that actually get CEOs and board members and venture capitalists and other like minded individuals on board with the big idea. And trying to get people to do that actually means moving people's mind. I'm really excited to be working with a new company called Magic Mind. If you haven't tried it yet, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. My guest and I, Eric, today, we were talking about being nootropic curious. And if you are like us, we're looking for things that give us a sharper mind, lower stress, kind of calm energy rather than that crazy phonetic caffeine feeling. And Magic Mind for me has been a game changer, not just in the morning after my now mushroom coffee instead of coffee bean coffee, but also in the afternoon when I would typically go for a big cappuccino in the afternoon just to keep me going and maybe give myself a little break. I love just having a shot of Magic Mind, kind of wakes up my brain and keeps me in flow. And I just love it. It is filled with amazing goodness for your body and your brain. And so that's why I'm asking my listeners to go ahead and check it out. You can check out the link in today's episode as well as on my podcast page. Try Magic Mind. I think it'll really change the way you think about your energy levels and maybe even give you an extra dose of innovation in your day. Eric, I know you're Magic Mind curious as well, so I'm excited to have you on the show today. You got your own you got your own little bottle of Magic Mind with you. Fantastic. Maybe we should just do a shot together
That
and,
sounds great.
and take a little sip. That's some good stuff. I do feel like it gives me like a little bit more clarity. Okay,
Done.
but I'll dive into the show because we're talking about innovation from a perspective that frankly we haven't really talked a lot about here. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of standards and how we bring innovation into places where largely has been the domain of the status quo, and rather trying to move things into new directions that maybe hasn't really been that present before. And that's why I'm really excited to have Eric West on the show with me today. He is the co-founder and chief growth officer at Convertible AI. And Convertible, well, I'm going to let Eric explain it to you, but Eric brings nearly 2 decades of experience in aerospace engineering, tech development, and strategic partnerships to Convertible, from developing rotor systems for Sikorsky aircraft to crafting innovative solutions in the automotive, IoT, and AI sectors. Eric's work has been driven by a commitment to innovation and operational excellence. Now, at Convertible, Eric focuses on simplifying the complexities of AI adoption for enterprises, ensuring that organizations have the support they need to harness the power of AI. With a proven track record of securing substantial funding for R&D projects and managing significant contracts, Eric's approach is practical, impactful, and perfectly aligned with the needs of today's businesses. Not to mention, he is absolutely crushing it with his newborn baby and still managing to stay awake for an early morning podcast. So, Eric, I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks for hosting, Susan.
So let's get into a little bit about how you got here, because your background is kind of unique, right? I mean, you got started back in college looking at these kinds of systems.
Absolutely. I think my career kind of was founded in undergrad at Carnegie Mellon, where I was part of the R&D sponsored research by DARPA that was interested in applying emerging technology pretty broadly in robotics to the grand challenge, right, that DARPA sponsored. And so it's ever since then, I feel
Wait,
like I've
for people who don't know what the DARPA challenge is, can you explain that?
happy to. DARPA, the DoD or Department of Defense entity, had sponsored several universities, or primarily universities, research teams to explore the application of autonomous systems in vehicles, right? And so they ended up creating, in partnership with several local authorities, these glorified missions or races that ended up being fully autonomous. In fact, some of the first fully autonomous races amongst different types of vehicles that have been developed specifically by these different university teams. And it led to some really powerful commercialization that is some of the foundling of what we now see as autonomous work, right?
Mm. And you've spent quite a bit of time in the automotive space as well.
That's right. Yes. In fact, post MBA, my first step out of business school, I should say, was actually into Harman International, which about a year after joining them to lead open innovation, they were acquired by Samsung. And that acquisition brought me out to the Bay Area, where I was put in charge of kind of both post-merger integration as well as the strategic partnerships local in the Bay Area with all the tech companies.
Mm.
I say to point out that that's what kind of opened my network into what became a role at Ford Motor Company in their Palo Alto team. And so 5 years later, through COVID, so many changes in the market around them of electrification. It was yet another fascinating time to be working in that industry on one of the more frontiers of their markets.
Yeah, and autonomous driving and things like that, it's been a promise for so long. Do you feel like we're inching there? Do you feel like we're running there? Given your insights into some of those spaces, what do you think?
Classic heuristic of hurry up and wait. And then through all these different, whether it's regulatory conversations, true technology capabilities on the development side, this is not a new story, right? We've seen this movie before, as they say. And I can tell you that it's no secret that the nonlinear curve that autonomous systems have taken, it greatly resembles what we're now seeing in the world of AGI, right? Which is this idea of general intelligence for AI. And just because it's possible doesn't mean there's commercial value, first off. And let's work backwards and realize it's one thing to invest in technology pushes, but then people also have to remember that's not the only force you could embrace in the process that may have, frankly, a stronger monetization schema behind it. Meaning,
Mhm.
in contrast to technology push, there's also market pulls, right? And these are that same heuristic from business school that I'm happy to bring back. But at the end of the day, I say it all to point out, just because these autonomous systems have been invested in with billions of dollars, doesn't mean that full autonomy is the only commercialization path. And that is a full way to come around to realize in the absence of chasing full autonomy, which every OEM now says is almost no longer, at least the only focus, it's really about finding the customer use cases that apply automation into how that delivers on the existing customer promises like safety and security of vehicle operations, right? And in the farther out case, a final point, I think this idea that it does matter what people are willing to pay for at the end of the day, right? And like that comes down to something as simple as the strategic valet that Tesla has been piloting, right, with the summons feature. And the idea is simply that there's a time and place for autonomy. And in the low speed mobility idea of where and how you have a valet for your car done, it's a great case for applying autonomy just because of the environment that is, well, not just with low speed mobility, but then offered in a way that is of specific value to that one customer at that one time. So it's not
Mm.
about saying the cars know what to do everywhere, every time, but rather in these specific instances that people really value it being confident enough to operate in.
Hmm. Right, because we need that trust factor before anything else happens, right?
Exactly.
But it's funny, as I look out at my new I bought a new car at the end of the year, and as I look out on it, I'm like, it just sits there doing nothing for 90% of the day, right? And like, okay, I got to get eggs later. But I always thought that fleets of cars would be a rentable entity at some point, especially for folks like me. And I know there are Airbnb related companies like Turo and some of the others that allow you to kind of rent out your car during the day for other people who need it, which I think is great. But more, I'd rather have car on demand. I don't even want to own a car. I just want to have, like you said, a valet show up with car when I need car. And then I want to go do all the things with said car that make me happy.
So yes, and
Hmm.
either deliver the car to you or deliver the eggs to you, right? And this is what gets back to if and as systems start aligning incentives as saying somehow well, again, this commercialization of its application, if there were systems that enable that incentive alignment around saying, almost the eggs become free, or you get paid to have the eggs delivered hypothetically because that car was on its way to doing some other logistics solution for someone else. That starts to make a more interesting story that's compelling to say why it would ultimately change your routine somehow, right? And that's what would actually make a dent in what ultimately is the user behavior change that, frankly, every OEM's been looking for at the end of the day, but has never realized people are still buying bigger trucks when roads are more congested than ever. So there's this challenge of managing duality of what we've been enabling people to do with what is of a broader interest, right? Which is things like traffic and congestion and parking, and which is
Oh,
affects everyone
yeah,
in the process, right?
right. Absolutely. And it's funny because I went at the end of the year and my accountant was like, go and get a 6,000 pound car because you can use that with your business. And I said, fantastic, because I drive a lot as a professional speaker. I drive gigs all the time. So he's like, great, if you get a 6,000 pound car, you can use that. That's what the tax code says. Oh, well, I'm a single woman who now has an Audi Q7 with 3 rows of seating. I'm just like, okay, I just pick up my friends all the time and I'm like, but I want to get like a yellow little stop sign that like comes out of the door that like feels like a little short bus that I could drive my girlfriends around. So we went away for a girls' weekend and I was like, everybody, like it's kind of foolish. But when we think of, I mean, it's also a little painful because I'm like, I don't want to be spewing this stuff into the environment. I don't want to pay for an oversized vehicle when I go to park in Manhattan, right? And but the tax code is the incentive that allows me to do the things I can do. I'm like, why wouldn't you incent me to have a smaller car that I can use for business, right? I don't own a farm, right? I'm not hauling lumber. Maybe incent me as a business owner in a different way.
You're nailing not the problem, but a more symptom of the problem.
Right.
That the types of incentives have not been thought of enough broadly, if you will, right? Where, to your point, if it's the parking companies that are starting to realize, hey, we'll again discount your parking if you come with a smaller vehicle, right? And maybe over time, not that that would change your mind today, but it would open your mind. I would hope over time that someone like you would then say, well, listen, if I know I'm going to the city today because that parking is so cheap for that small car, I wonder if I can get a Turo, right? That's a small car. It's a rental on demand. And then you
Mm,
start sewing together these, well, innovations that says, wait, if I can get access to that cheaper there, you start realizing for yourself, wait, it pays to be more flexible and more like adaptive to what it is that my incentives tell me make sense to me now. And
mhm.
that's where things I think start to have tectonic shifts in the landscape.
That's a really good point. Wait, so tell us a little bit about convertible and how we got here because it's an interesting shift. I think your last gig when we first met, and shout out to our friends at ILO, the Institute for Innovation at Large Organization, and our mutual friend Peter Temis. You were when I first met you, you were doing all kinds of cool and exciting things with Ford.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So tell us how we went from there to here.
Totally. So what I'll share about what we're doing at Convertible AI the story started at Ford. And it was when I was at Ford working on a project in their aftermarket division, in fact, the Ford Customer Service Division, they call it. I pretty starkly observed the growing challenge, which is by many called the technician shortage. But by the way, it's not true technically, actually. It's not just a shortage, it's a lot that underpins what becomes seen as a shortage, such as eroding mentorship models and, let's just say, no longer the same type of inter-technician communication that used to exist, and training has been more challenging than ever. Enrollments are down in new programs for younger aspiring technicians. And so it was through all of that that I made a friend, right? That's some of where our best friends come from, are these challenging times, right? And went on to leave Ford when I did, and he ended up finding himself as the now CEO and chairman of the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence. And that same certification standards body, the ASE, they call it, it's the one where if you go to any aftermarket maintenance shop for your car needs, health needs, you'll see a little on any of the windows, a blue circle that says ASE. That's what we're talking about here. And so it's again the body that brings industry collaboration together of ensuring that standards are developed for technician certification. because otherwise it's anti-competitive, right? And it means that there isn't, well, a nearly similar shot or symmetric shot about saying why John versus Bob and like let's say any of their friends could get access to good paying jobs, right? Fair wages and all these things in the absence of any standards and saying they're all come from the same place, same way. So fast forward a bunch later, I realize as more and more people are spinning out of these companies like Tesla, building AI-based systems that mean they can help technicians do their job, it only exacerbates that underlying problem that still are no standards in the process of what AI can do to help a technician. So that means that someone that knows how to use AI, a given technician, technically can do better than someone who doesn't if they do it in a way that means they could diagnose the vehicle's health correctly, which is still a big open challenge. So what we're doing is we actually in the fourth quarter last year announced a partnership with that same ASE and our friend Dave leading the charge, saying we need to use what the ASE has been proven to be great at, which is leading industry collaboration, organizing thought, and putting some structure to what it means to work together on co-defining the actual benchmarks required for the industry to define what it means to use AI to help technicians best. And so in
Mm.
that way, it's just the beginning time right now, but we're looking for industry partners to come together and say, hey, not just what would it mean to use it correctly, but then how do we know it helps not just our technicians, but the underlying customers and systems and organizations all at the same time. That's how you can truly harness the capability of AI.
And it's really fascinating because we think about standards sometimes as a limiting function of innovation, but anybody you talk to in the innovation space is like actually having guardrails, right? Having guides that those constraints is a benefit oftentimes to innovation, right? Like we know the systems that we have to operate within, and then we can go and innovate the systems. But especially, like, I think of so many different places where structure and systems have been a benefit, like even things like UFC or mixed martial arts, like that place, the octagon used to be this crazy place where you could like go to the death, but then no sponsors wanted to get behind it. Nobody wanted to really be involved except some very scary folk, which made for good viewing, but absolutely terrifying
That's
for liability purposes. Nobody could insure the damn thing. And so suddenly when there's rules, people go, "Oh, now I know what the operating systems are. Now I have sponsors. Now I want to get involved. Now I can see a future of this thing. It's not just a giant free for all."
I Susan, we could talk about this for hours, right? And like I love where you just brought that of like it does go back to the beginning of our conversation this morning about incentive alignment. And only once you find out what are the right incentives, knowing again in this new chapter of AI, it does represent a tectonic shift if you're able to figure out how to make best use of it again. That's what we believe we're on an incredible path because at the end of the day, you should take advantage of what ultimately becomes the definition of requirements. The same thing about every product program out there that got us to this point. But in this case now, in way more breadth and depth than you ever were capable of nearly as quickly, right? That's again what the latest version of this chapter of AI development is. So I say that all to point out that's what we're saying. We should be representative of the way consumers think, the actual vehicle owners, to the way the maintenance operations are run at friends like Bridgestone and Firestone, right? Their core business, in fact, as well as then the way technicians, both the people themselves, the schools that teach them and get them up to speed on what's the latest, and by the way, then it's ultimately the entire ecosystem around parts and logistics and all the things that go into supporting that industry.
Which, by the way, biggest moneymaker for the auto industry, right, is everything that happens after you buy your car. A lot of people don't know that. They're like, "Why is my car $50,000?" You're like, "Oh, just you wait." Right? It's all the other pieces that make this so, frankly, expensive and profitable. Yeah.
Yes, and again, that's you just you beat me to it. But I was going to say, Ford, GM, Stellantis, they're all the same in that they're not actually not a car company if you look at their P&L. They're actually a company that makes cars so they can sell more parts, right? And even that's separate from the service, which then frankly all that cash goes to dealers, their dealer partners. So like technically the OEM is just a parts manufacturer, not
Mhm.
an assembly group. let alone logistics, delivery, and all these other things.
Right. So let's get into the storytelling side of this business because you've explained it eloquently here, but what is the story that you need to tell people in order for them to understand where the business is going and why they need someone like Convertible? Like what's the story you tell, Eric, to and who are you pitching it to?
Sure. At the end of the day, this is all about people. I'll start there, right? And I think
What are
that,
their titles so we know where we're operating? Who
oh,
are we pitching to?
understood. We'll start there backwards. Okay. So
Yeah.
who are we pitching to? We're pitching to, at the end of the day, the heads of service operations at, I keep saying, Bridgestone, Firestone, BP, owns Shell. Sorry, not Shell, owns Castrol. Shell has their own mobility team. And so these companies who have both global scale, multi-market, as well as the one of their core businesses aligned with vehicle service operations, they call it, that's who will benefit most. Because at the end of the day, what we can deliver on is making them the best place to work for their technicians. And if done with us, we know for a fact it's because we'll have taken into account every or many of their technicians' actual specific interests and the way in which that story gets developed. And back to why AI, where it is now in Gen AI, so powerful, is it could finally do the thing that, well, system had missing this whole time, which is the ultimate personalization, right? And I say that not to go into the idea of a glorified chatbot, but rather knowing and remembering that Bob in Tuscaloosa is actually a left-handed technician. And it's a silly adage, but at the same time, things like that specific points of memory do matter and make them feel like they're remembered, that they're part of the answer, right? And that I think comes back to how this doesn't just make technicians feel like they're part of the future workforce, which is very important at this point, reminding people that they are a big part of the future, but that at the end of the day, this is the future of work, is simply working with technology. So
Mm.
the question is, it's a big way to get not just our friends who are aspiring Gen Z part of the workforce into the workforce, but showing this is not like their parents worked, right? This idea of like working with technology could be the entirely new, in back to ASE, their newest certification could be this idea of being certified to work with technology. Like that doesn't exist right now. So
Mm.
I think it's categorically defining of all these new ways that people at the end of the day want to be part of an answer. The question is what makes most sense to them. And that's what we'll get to know as time goes on. Because this is not just uh, a development product like you build it once and then set it and forget it. This is going to be a living, breathing thing that at the end of the day becomes custom and purpose built for the way in which anyone at a Firestone or a BP works, not just what they need to do.
And I think there are a couple of very interesting, just even philosophical discussions around this. I think that a distinction between technology designed simply for the most educated, sophisticated, and specialized creates a giant power imbalance between the people who actually need to apply and use the technology. And it's a dangerous place, actually, when we get separated from the technology that we need to use in order to be successful.
Yep.
So we see like a concentration of people who know about what AI is, as opposed to a desire to democratize and bring AI together with us so that frontline mechanics who are fixing your car are equally as versed as they are in getting into their Gmail accounts. There's a desire to bring those capabilities together quickly because we made a lot of mistakes with Internet 1.0. And I remember getting into this business in 1998 and feeling that distinction between those in the know and those who weren't. And I was grateful to be on the side of those in the know. But I watched like this floundering for a lot of people for a long time before they got how their Hotmail account worked or whether or not they would need and I being just a genius marketer, remember telling a B2B client, you know what, I don't think you need a website really. I don't know whether or not you are actually, whether this thing is going to last for any length of time. I'm glad to know about it, but yeah, the clairvoyant that I am as a technologist. But so I'll definitely fall on my sword. But so how can we do it differently this time around where the mechanic, the frontline worker, the factory worker sees themselves as being partnered with technology? And it's a different mindset. It's a different story that needs to be told, even philosophically about how we approach it. So we don't have these kind of oligarchs who are holding on to the technology, who don't educate lawmakers, who don't educate CEOs, who are approving billions of dollars in budget for AI, but don't actually even understand how it works.
You're giving me some PTSD back to some things I personally experienced too. No, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind. First
Mm.
off, we need the the, the master technicians is what they're called in automotive, but it's the people that have proven that they know exactly what to do without needing to even look at the manual anymore, right?
Wait, what's a master technician do for the rest of us who don't work in automotive? What is a master technician?
Totally. So it's a level of achievement in the world of the ASE and where you become certified. Oh, sorry,
It is.
the ASE, that same automotive standards body I mentioned, National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence.
Mm.
Again, the same body that certifies technicians in having developed the certification standards that then these local and distributed groups of universities train people specifically to be compliant with those standards.
Master technician works inside of an automobile manufacturer.
Nope,
Where does that individual work?
these are the ultimate graybeards within every shop. In fact, most shops have master technicians in them. They're just simply the
Say
people
shops,
who
you mean a mechanic shop?
correct. Yes, so a car
Ah,
shop.
okay,
Exactly.
got you. So going to my local service center, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay,
hmm
got it.
And they employ master technicians, which certainly are back to the hierarchy of knowing ultimately who to trust for what guidance of what makes most sense to try next, for lack of a better term, in diagnosing a vehicle's health. Well, these are the people that, unlike some who just went through the training to become certified as a technician, those people are out of the gate looking at the manuals, for lack of a better term, often. They're saying, oh, wait, I remember this from so and so. Now let me look at what to do from here. Well, unlike that, someone who's been doing that for 30 years, a master technician, and you don't need 30 years to become a master technician, but let's just say someone who's done it for long enough, they don't even need to look at the manual anymore. It's all in their head. I say that all to point out that's what we're trying to do is learn from the master technicians, the people who know it so well. They've actually developed what they would not may say use the same words, but that in the world of AI would mean that we can actually embed the way they reason through unstructured inputs of a consumer coming in saying, hey, my car vibrates on the highway. All right, well, which way does it vibrate and like at what speed? Anyway, all these questions come up, but that doesn't matter nearly as much to that 30-year veteran saying, oh, well, in that case, I know it could be one of two things. Let me try the one that's easiest, and then I'll know right away what to do from there, right? That kind of operating confidence doesn't exist at an early stage when you're just getting going in your career as a technician. And so it's that kind of thing we're trying to bridge the gap on, but in a
Mm.
way that means we can distribute those kind of learnings in simplifying the process of doing the underlying diagnosis work of your vehicle's problems. And so that's what we're trying to do. Back to your point about making this feel like everyone's included. We want to work with the most educated or experienced down to everyone that wants to be part of the answer at the early stage. And then through that, this really does get into how do you make well, more people feel like they're they're on the right side of where this could go, not just what it is, right? And I said it could go because over time there's going to be more and more automation around, let's say, people's work, and everyone now, let's say, more investment is going towards humanoid development of the robots that look like humans, should say, as a microcosm of all and where this is going. There remains some jobs today where automotive technicians have to do things that put their body at physical risk around a vehicle, right? It could be as simple as removing a tire off a vehicle, but like for an older technician, that may be challenging, right? So back
Oh
to
yeah,
it
I have the best
depends.
mechanic in town, and he's kind of crunked. Like his body, you can tell, like he's exhausted. I see the pain in how he operates walking around the shop, and the man has a wealth of knowledge between his ears, but his body is not capable of doing the things that his younger technicians do.
So exactly, you nailed it. And that same person, where there's one, there's many. And
Right.
the person who has the biggest challenge physically, in a lot of cases, remains remembering of all the things they've learned in the process, just not able to do nearly as much anymore on a daily basis. And so that's where we almost propose, including what our plan is, developing the Duolingo for technicians, but not to test technicians. It's reversed. It's actually to learn from technicians of like in that, I hate to say literally, it's a mobile app experience that whether if they can't do it because they hurt their hand or shoulder, this gives them an opportunity to still keep engaged and help the system that ultimately helps continue the industry and bring that, let's say, younger generation forward by embedding the reasoning that we can apply to their individual challenges every day. And so it's through all of that that I'll say that, comma, in the background, there's something called the right to repair as legislation being pushed, not just in automotive, but in in fact, the
Cell phones.
phones, cell
Sure.
phones, any embedded system really. And that's coming for automotive soon. Not saying tomorrow, but soon. And
Mm.
given that, there's going to be a growing challenge of the OEMs who maintain the proprietary information about what it means to repair a Ford vehicle, a GM vehicle, correctly according to the OEM. That information will become free knowledge soon. And once that's done, the proprietary nature of what it means to have specific value, going back to your Ford dealer for your Ford maintenance, is going to be challenged, right? And that means that the thing that independent repair shops, meaning not not OEM dealers for that matter, they have been able to develop their entire business in the absence of the official repair manuals at certain levels for diagnostics. And so that's going to be a huge tectonic shift in what flattens the competitive landscape in a good way of making independent repair shops more competitive with dealers. And so back to incentives, there's going to be a whole host of other things that means even as we then look to extend what we're building into consumers, I think there's going to be a really interesting play of how it is we can make people take their unstructured input, the way they think, because they're just not trained technicians, and translate that into what would arm them with better information going into getting a competing bid from in a repair shop to a Ford dealer, right? That's where we see all these systems of systems converging.
Mm. So, do you get pushback from the technicians themselves going, you just want to collect all of my knowledge in order to put me out of business?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. This is part of why we know we're not going direct to technicians as a business model.
Mm.
The stakeholders, while there absolutely are technical stakeholders, we realize that this isn't for everyone, and it isn't for everyone now either. There's got to be an adoption curve we embrace. And that adoption curve comes back to how do we start with the service operations who employ those people, comma, acknowledge that there are specific soon to retire, if not already retired, master technicians that we can work with that are very willing to help because they want to help almost support or apply their experience and industry knowledge without knowing what else to do if not this, right? So we can give them an answer to that as a means to start walking down a path where we say, listen, the growing number of Gen Z workers coming into the workforce will leapfrog those in that middle, saying that in the event they're more willing than you are to work with this technology, that'll be, I think, what does start to move people's minds and say, you're willing, you're able and willing to work with us and then join us whenever you, let's say, realize there are specific need for a solution like this. Not saying you have to use it every day, all day, but rather when you're most challenged by figuring out what to do in diagnostics of your car, of the car that you're working on, that's when a particular need comes up. And that's what we're chasing.
Yeah. So what's the lesson for other industries? Eric, you're clearly like at the forefront doing this with automotive. What is the lesson for other industries as they start thinking about how do I kind of like squeeze the toothpaste tube of AI and I move that brilliance from inside the boardroom or inside the IT team or the business unit team into the rest of the organization? What's the learning for other people who are thinking about incorporating AI into like the different different facets of the organization?
Totally. I would say broadly, it's growingly interesting to see the application of synthetic data. And I say that in this way because what synthetic data is simply data you've created
Mhm.
versus what customers have created for you. And that's what is literal customer data, right? So two different things. I say it because now it's something that's fairly unique to this generative AI space where we can create representative data sets that many different parts of an organization can start simulating what either is better forecasts or whatever it is that they're trying to do that, let's just say, they haven't been able to do themselves, in a way that shows, unlike before, they're simply able to build representative forecasts, like something that they didn't have the insight or access to the insight nearly quickly enough as you can now. And
Mhm.
that's where, if they have to have a part vision but part conviction, that like that would be helpful to them at the end of the day, of strategic value, right? And that's kind of where we always position ourselves, saying, well, how do we know what's of strategic value to you unless we have some market data like a technician challenge that says this is an industry challenge, which is what has put us on this path.
I'm I'm thinking there's so many places, and it's funny because I work with a German startup that just looks for duplicative AI strategies being released through an organization because there's so much siloed work around AI. How do you combat it's a great little piece of software that says, by the way, 16 silos are currently working on the exact same AI project. You all may want to talk and share data. Like it's amazing how much money is being thrown at this. It was like when every department of a business needed a web page back in 1998, and we're all building their own independent websites. Yeah, they weren't connecting to the mothership. Like that's what it reminds me of on some level.
And
Yeah.
that whole like bottoms up versus top down thing, right? We could acknowledge that all these different resourced teams within companies have been told, for one of many reasons, to focus on X, Y, and Z. Well, we acknowledge that, like, first off, keep going. Don't stop that, to start at least.
Hmm.
Let's take a beat and say, well, also, Mr. and Mrs. Executive, what are you trying to do or become? And work backwards from that to say, how do we ensure that you're set up for success, where we become an augmenting partner to then what it is we can accelerate the thing you need most, right? And that, as kind of an external partner, we've learned that's an extremely helpful position to be in.
Yeah. Well, Eric, this is a fascinating conversation, and, and I'm thrilled you and I are also on the juice together, on Magic Mind together. But I need to now ask you, I'm going to ask you to like really plug into your Magic Mind brain. And I'm going to ask you the 3 hot seat questions that I ask everyone who's been on the show. Number one, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
I would have to say duct tape.
Whoa, never been mentioned on the show before. Why duct tape?
By and large, while everyone's been trying to make things move since the dawn of time, there's equal, if not more, value in making sure things don't move. And stopping things from moving is what duct tape is such a quick and easy solution to, that is truly usable almost everywhere.
Amazing. Amazing. Great. I love that answer. Okay. We are here to dispel the myth that innovation happens from one single genius. We believe innovation happens in teams. And so, if you could join any innovation team in the course of human history, which team would you have liked to have been on?
I hate what I'm about to say because I'm sure everyone else thinks the same way, but it's the Disney Imagineers, like, original team, where they
Like
saw,
Walt and his team.
yeah, right, because like being in that room, there was so many things in the world changing, and I can only imagine what unique insight they led with, right, from Walt's vision, and like how they just made it happen. And like at the end of the day, that's so much what innovation both is and is not, is separating those from who can make it happen, who can't. And that's what it means to
Mm,
be productive.
right. So, not just from that first Mickey Mouse movie, but everything into the theme parks and what have you
That's right.
that would become that legacy. Yeah.
That's right.
And I love how they're Imagineers. Like inherent in that title is engineering, right? Inherent in that title is the desire to not just dream it, but to make it. I
It's
love
what it's what inspired me to become an engineer.
Disney. Wow. That's so funny because I have a personal vendetta against Walt for making every hero of a Disney movie either an orphan or the like he kills off the parents in virtually every single movie to make every child watching a Disney movie at their most vulnerable state. right? And then at that point, every child is sitting right in the palm of Walt Disney's hand. He's like, now I can take you on a journey because you're terrified beyond Friday the 13th, Scream, or anything else. You have hit the primal fear of every child from jump. Thanks, Walt.
Hey, that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay. But obviously, can't have a childhood in America without Walt Disney. That's for sure. Lastly,
Mhm.
what is something that really pisses you off or something that you wish existed in the world that needs to be innovated now?
Myself often saying like I can't fix everyone's problems, but and this idea of like I feel like people are unfortunately just too short-sighted in what they end up building. And that means it's just huge missed opportunity, right? And I say that all to point out this idea of like an insight generator for product people, where it's as it only once they've been able to almost learn more quickly than as is that they should consider other potential requirements for their program, which is outside of their purview, could they be more, well, creative, literally, right? And I think that's what I wish existed broadly.
What is that thing?
It's, well, obviously it's Insight's platform. And like in that case, it's not just B2C, but B2B too, back to incentive alignment. And how do you align if it's a wearable product, your insurance systems incentives, right? And like how does that all not, and importantly, has not been informing of what becomes product development processes? I still don't understand, right? And it's because having been in them, I know it's but not that hard, but also that's part of what leadership from those that are funding those programs are missing. So the question is, how do we go upstream and make sure that enough, well, has been taken into account in the process of making these things come to life before they snap the line and say, all right, let's go.
Mm. See that? And I was just traveling in the South where there was 8 and 10 inches of snow, and all I wanted was an orderly boarding process to get on the plane. That was all I was hoping for from an innovation standpoint. But you've got us all down to huge systems. So Eric, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about Convertible AI, what should they do?
First off, convertibleai.com. Start there. You can find my LinkedIn, Eric R. West. And I would love to chat with anyone who's curious about what this could do, really. That this is any fan of a storytelling expert like Susan. It's a friend of mine. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. And just to be clear, no relation to Kanye West, is that right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, but we're going to leave that door open. Got you. Eric, thank you so much for joining me on the Innovation Storytellers Show today. And I'm just going to remind you to reclaim your brain with a little bit of magic mind. You got your model.
Cheers.
I love it. Cheers. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.